everyone. Welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers, seekers of happiness and joy, seekers of a centered approach to success in life, seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation. We're so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
As you know, Melissa, we've been doing a bunch of, or a little bit of rearranging at work as far as our organization structure. We've, I think I've talked about it a little bit before, but we had a goal for our business about of growth and where we wanted to get it to. Mm-hmm. And we hit that goal.
Oh, yeah?
A while ago. Yeah, I think you and I talked about it like a few months ago where it's just like, when you hit a goal and then you're just like, what's the next goal? Or like, I was feeling a little bit, I think, like, I don't know, anticlimactic around meeting my goal or something.
Right.
And we had talked about how, like, as soon as I hit a goal, I don't even celebrate my goal. I just move to the next goal.
Yes, exactly.
Like an entrepreneur's problem.
As you've been whipped into believing.
Yeah. But, so we hit this goal and we knew that we needed to bring our organization to the next level. You know, we needed to get more organized, more precise around operations and process. And what that meant for us was that we actually needed to elevate a bunch of our team into a more leadership role and to have more responsibility.
Oh, got it.
Instead of only a few people on kind of the top.
Yeah, the very top.
We had a small leadership team, and it kind of dictated down and led what we needed to do. We decided what we needed to do to get to our next level, and our next goal was to bring more people up into the leadership team.
Yes,
which meant we're giving a handful of people more responsibility.
Yep.
So which is awesome, which is fun, which people like to have that movement in their career.
Yeah. Oh, big time.
But one of the things that I always look for as we do that with people is like, what is the added stress or anxiety into people who've not maybe typically been in that role or at that level.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's so good you're thinking about that, because lots of people really don't think about it from that perspective at all. It's really good you're thinking about it.
Well, I think that's probably from like experience. It's that's from, I think there's that business term Peter principle. It's like you elevate somebody into a spot that's beyond their capability. And that's not a judgment statement.
Right.
That sometimes just is like, like the idea,
definitely.
You take your best salesperson, you make them the sales manager. You take your best engineer, you make them the head of engineering or the engineering manager. They're like,
oh, they're terrible here.
Like I'm an engineer, I don't manage people. This is terrible. So I'm always like pretty on high alert around those inflection points in our business because I have Peter principled people like, and it's not great. Like it doesn't end great. So
I'm in coaching relationships with some people that are exactly there. Yeah.
So I thought we should talk about like this idea about how more responsibility affects you.
Yeah.
Because I think it affects people in a lot of different ways. Like for me, I like it in a pressure kind of way, but it shuts
to
some
a point.
But it shuts some people down.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like carry that sword probably way too aggressively.
Yeah.
Especially at home.
Got in trouble recently, have you?
We'll talk about that later.
That's another podcast. I agree with you 100%. I think that a lot of times, we can talk about in the workplace, but I'd also really like to talk about it at home too, because your level of responsibility, not you, but collectively, our level of responsibility says much about who we think we are. And we tie so much of our responsibility to our ego. We just do. And I think like in the workplace, for sure, if you see somebody that has recently been elevated, or maybe they have been for a long time, but they're maybe not in the right spot, right? Or there's just a number of factors that come into play because you can tell that they're feeling a level of responsibility that they don't feel comfortable with. They don't know what to do with it. And instead of it making them feel like they have just been elevated or they're winning something, it actually does the reverse and makes them lose a few steps in self-confidence. Right?
Yeah. The, yeah, so I feel like if you are elevated in a position where you're more responsible for things and you're being held accountable, and you're being held accountable
And you're
for
being
that
held accountable.
responsibility.
Yeah.
It does feel like you're in the pressure cooker a little bit. Like, oh, everyone's relying on me. Like, I have to perform a job. My team's got to do a thing. We've got to perform to these metrics. I'm the one leading the team. I'm responsible for it. If we as a team fail or don't hit our metrics, that's on me.
Right.
And then you start just getting into this anxiety spiral.
Right. And then how you handle things really is a departure depending on your personality style and how you were raised. How you were lauded for taking responsibility for things.
Yep.
And I just thought of something. When you look at responsibility as the overarching theme of this conversation, I think that there's really two kinds. There's chosen responsibility where you choose to be responsible. You choose to take on more. And then there's given. There's given responsibility. And do you feel differently depending on which camp it comes from?
Oh, yeah. So this is a really interesting bit about responsibility. Like, it just actually made me think about, this is almost like you can imagine this as like a sitcom character, but we've all probably been in a situation where we maybe have a manager and they have an overinflated sense of responsibility. Like, I'm the manager here at the McDonald's and I'm like responsible for everybody's French fries being perfect. But we've all probably worked for or come across colleagues that have kind of this inflated sense of responsibility. Like, yeah, dude, everything's running fine here. You can back down a little bit.
What's that movie? Was it Office Space? Is that what it's called?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Office
I'm going to
Space.
need you to come in on Saturday. Right.
Yeah, same thing. Like, that guy thought he was a critical part of the whole entire organization. Turns out he was useless.
I hope I'm not that way. I hope I'm not living like that and not realizing it. Do you think anybody's thinking that right now? Am I that guy?
I would let you know, Melissa.
Please don't let me be that guy.
So, and I actually see this in our org. Another story we've got, I've got a longtime employee that is retiring. And as soon as he decided to retire, his whole energy at work changed.
Yes, you mentioned that a couple of pods ago. You were talking about that.
And I was like, Steve, what, like, you just seem to be completely different. And he goes, well, now that I'm not like responsible for
I don't have
like
to do anything.
the P&L statement anymore, it feels a lot different.
Wow.
And I didn't realize how much personal responsibility he had been taking for the entire business for like 15 years in a row. Like, I knew that, I mean, obviously I trusted him with like running an entire business, one of my entire businesses. He ran it. I didn't, I
know.
I coached him, but it wasn't like I was, it was great. And I realized, like, I must have offloaded all anxiety onto him. But I actually didn't realize the depth. I didn't realize the depth of anxiety that was causing him.
Oh, so interesting. Well, and the differentiation that you just made between personal and professional, because he was both. He was taking on personal responsibility in this professional environment because he didn't make a distinction between the two. And I think, don't we all do that?
Yeah.
I know I do. I take on in some situations, I take on way more responsibility than I should or need to. Many, many times, like in my personal experience, for example, there's many places in my life where I will feel, I think that's where a lot of anxiety sits. Or if it's not, if we overuse the term anxiety, let's just say stress. A lot of stress sits in this overabundant need to feel responsible for situations around me, my family, my loved ones, where I'll feel like just because I have a thought to care for them, then I will automatically feel responsible to do that thought and go right from thinking to planning. And it's almost instantaneous. And then the stress just skyrockets. It's like my level of responsibility is too often tied to my level of respondability.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And I don't even know if that's a real word.
Responsibility and responding to things.
Yep.
Yeah. Like you want to be responsible, and that turns into action.
Yeah. Now,
but that might not be the best thing to do.
Precisely. Or the action that is chosen may be the wrong action, and then that just brings on more responsibility. It can be a real circle. I'm working with this new leadership team, and I've met with them a few times, and it's a company that's doing quite well. It's a fairly new startup company. The team is the executive team is 8 people, and it's a varying levels of experience within that executive team. Some have quite a few years, and some don't at all. And yet they all feel this responsibility to be completely aligned, completely thinking in the same patterns. Like, don't challenge or question, just because they're trying to do a good job. They're trying to do a good job. But what that does is it leaves the newer ones feeling very self-conscious and perhaps not wanting to be exposed necessarily. Like, just keep your head down, because if you try to add to this conversation in a way that's not accurate according to the more seasoned players on the team, then you may be judged. And these are very subtle. It's all very subtle, but it's very prevalent, in my opinion. So I think people's mindsets, it's like sometimes people think that they want more responsibility in their jobs, at home, whatever. Like, let's just use the job analogy, because you were talking about that first. It's like people want more responsibility because they feel like it's time now. I've been here long enough. I've been in my job long. I've been in this career long enough. I've gone and gotten this skill. I've gotten this schooling. Like, we come up with all the reasons why we think we should have more responsibility about something, where really more responsibility isn't an appropriate thing for us at all, because it pushes us right out of what we're so good at and forces us into this different way.
I actually just had a conversation with one of my top performing salespeople. He also kind of wanted he wanted to have a career progression conversation.
Yeah.
And he was a little miffed that we actually offered a sales manager role to somebody else without even asking him.
Oh, sure.
But I was like, yep, probably should have asked you. Fair critique.
Yeah.
But also understand he would have taken, it's a whole different role, it's a different set of responsibilities, and you would have taken a giant pay whack.
Yeah.
Did you even want me to ask you?
Is that how you phrased it?
Yes.
Wait, you phrased it a pay whack?
Yeah. I was like, you're right. I made that decision for you, but also I didn't even think it was worth talking to you about.
I just saw your new car. I didn't think you would want that.
Right. Stick to the awesome job you have and the thing you're really awesome at.
Yeah. But sales is one of those pockets in business where very, very rarely can a top performing salesperson become a very good sales leader. I'd say less than 10%. In all of my years of experience. The level of responsibility changes so dramatically. Just using that role as an example, because it becomes not just a single contribution role anymore. It becomes a multi-person contribution role, which means you have to spread out your competition and ego
Yeah.
for everybody else to win. And that's a lot of responsibility for you, to try to motivate others, to be excited for others when they succeed, probably more than you have in numbers. And that's okay as a manager. A real good manager will be excited about that because that's what they're in it for, and they know they'll get override, right? But boy, that single contribution to all of a sudden feel like, no, I want more responsibility because I've been in sales long enough. I should have this, air quotes.
All right, I got 2 stories about how responsibility can become a liability.
Oh, let's hear it.
Okay. Back to my retiring employee, Steve. As soon as he decided he was going to retire, we started also simultaneously working on transferring his responsibilities to other people in the org.
Yep.
Which is what we got to do, right?
Yeah.
And as we were doing that, we had this like multi-year strategy that we wanted to pivot the focus of the products.
Right. Yep.
But we had never gotten there. We haven't gotten there yet. And as soon as Steve let go of that responsibility, the rest of the team very quickly started enacting that vision.
Oh,
and
interesting.
Steve goes, wow, JJ, like, look how fast everybody's moving on this stuff. And I was like, yeah, Steve, they certainly are. Why do you think that is? And he's like, I don't know.
Did he? He did? He didn't see it?
Yeah, and I was like, well,
bless his heart.
You might have been holding on a little bit too hard. So he was taking so much responsibility for the month in, month out revenue, expenses of the business. And he knew that like that holding on to status quo was the way he was feeling safe and being responsible for the business. I had been asking him to like take the risk and pivot into a new direction. But his sense of duty there and responsibility for the whole team wasn't allowing him to take the risk, even though I was telling him to take the risk.
Right.
As soon as he let go and said, oh, this isn't my problem anymore.
Right.
Like, boom, like the whole team
bottleneck opened.
Yep. So, and I'm not faulting him for that. Like, it's completely reasonable. And actually, he's done, he's done just like the most amazing job over the many years. But there's that point where that sense of duty started becoming
a liability,
a bit of a liability, and not necessarily even for Steve. It was actually more of a liability for me. So,
you see
so
that
that's
a
interesting.
lot. You see that a lot actually in management as well. When managers take on responsibility with other people, yet they're not exactly sure how to disperse that work product or workload. And they don't recognize that when they have new responsibilities, it's not about them doing it themselves. It's about them learning to leverage their relationships in a new way. But that's so scary because it leaves them feeling like, oftentimes, it leaves them feeling like that's not going to get done as good as I could do it. And like it's just easier if I do it myself. I can get it done perfectly and faster if I don't have to include anyone else. And that is a lot of responsible way of thinking that people think is helpful.
But it actually backfires.
100%.
It's that it does turn it into like that liability. It becomes a bad trait instead of a good trait.
Yeah. I'm just reflecting on my own life. And I think that it's really important as we're talking about responsibility for everyone to think about in their personal lives too, because I was just thinking, like with my spouse, there are a number of projects around the house or things just day-to-day living in a house that I don't really like asking Mitch to do stuff a lot. I mean, sometimes I will, but a lot of times I don't. Like if I see something needs to get done and it just sits and bothers me, and then I will end up trying to take responsibility for dealing with it, air quotes again, but I don't deal with it nearly as efficiently as he would. I may do it in a way that actually could break something or make something worse. Like just regular fix-it stuff around the house. Like I broke our window because I didn't want to ask Mitch.
What?
Because I thought I'll take this, I'll do it. I see it, I can do it. And then I ended up breaking it. And then I felt like kind of like ridiculous because I thought, oh, for God's sake, it would have taken him 5 minutes and he just knows how to fix everything. He just does. And I don't know how to, I'm actually quite practical in a lot of ways, but not with this, right? So there I was like, I'll just do it myself. I'll just take that responsibility. And I ended up making it a bigger thing than I needed to.
Well, what do you think, like, the word responsibility and the word duty?
Yeah.
Those, like, are very close to each other.
I think so.
I guess you have a sense of duty to do things.
Yeah.
There's a responsibility. And I feel like if you have, like, if the expectations of your responsibility,
yeah,
like your own expectations and someone else's expectations are misaligned, and especially if you have an overinflated sense of duty,
right,
that can actually be really harmful in a relationship.
Yeah, and it actually can be very harmful on self.
Like, because then you can so easily become like the martyr, like I do everything around here and I'm the only one taking any of this seriously, and I'm shouldering the whole weight of the family's financials, the cleanliness of our house, the responsibility of the children, the list goes
the
on
car
and on,
maintenance, the lawn,
everything. And then you can easily slide into resentment.
Yeah.
Around that, you become the martyr, you become you're resentful towards everyone else, and no one's helping, and and you get this whole huge self-focused thing, and it can start really easily with responsibility.
Yeah.
Which is a good virtue. It can start as a good virtue.
Right, I agree.
And turn into a really negative problem.
Right. And I can give you an example too on my side. Like just a couple of weeks ago, I was meeting with some dear friends that I haven't seen for a long time, and the day before, I thought, oh, I should make them some sourdough. Okay. Like this is just, they would really appreciate that. There are people that would really value a homemade loaf of bread. Like they would love that. They're older. They would love that. That's like an old fashioned way of showing love is to bring homemade food. So, but it was way too late in the day to think about doing that because sourdough has a huge, long process, right? So then I was like, oh, well, no, I don't have to do that. Maybe I'll just bring them some eggs from the chickens or whatever. And then I was like, I should bring eggs too. So I had a little war in my mind because I thought of this idea and then I felt responsible to do the idea. I was up until 2:00 in the morning getting it ready.
Oh, jeez.
Okay. I was meeting them in St. Paul at 8:00 the next morning. Okay. Which, is 45 minutes from my house. And I was up at 6 so I could bake said loaf of bread. So that is an example of going just so over my skis. Like I didn't need to do that, but I wanted to. And I just thought, oh, I think they would appreciate that so much. And you know what? Would it have been better had I thought about it like 6 hours earlier? Yes, it would have. So I think sometimes we do think about things and then because it feels good, we want to do it. So it's not even, sometimes it's because we just needed to stay status quo or simpatico to what we expect. But I think other times there's this level of chosen responsibility that puts us in a crazy spot.
Yeah.
Because we want to, But if you don't keep that in check. Now, that was a perfect example. I was thrilled that I did it, and they loved it. I'm so glad I did. And I knew I didn't have anything going on the rest of the weekend, so it wasn't a big deal at all. But that's an example, though, of I had this idea, and suddenly it became like, oh, I gotta do this.
Yeah.
And it became a responsibility.
I think that a lot of times it can feel really good to be really responsible for things. It does feel good to take care of other people.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
like I do take a lot of pride in running an organization where we, pay, we make payroll for 70 families. I do like that responsibility. It does make me proud.
Yeah.
So, but there are some sharp edges to it.
I know. It's just, that's why it's so important to really consider, when does it become a liability for you? When does it become a liability for me? Because I can easily pinpoint times of the week or the month or a period of my life where I am absolutely exhausted. And I can promise you that most of the time that exhaustion is because I have gone overboard and I am in the liability camp of my responsibilities.
Yep.
Chosen.
Yep. I would be really interested. We should try to get someone on the pod. It would be really interesting for me to hear from someone who's got a very high responsibility job, like an ER doc or an EMT, because they're making really, really critical split-second decisions every single day, and the sense of responsibility in those really critical roles
has
got to be really interesting.
Yeah, that's such a good call out. I do actually know an ER doc. I should ask him if he'd come on. He's a little goofy. It's a little goofy. Actually, I know a couple of them, and they're both goofy
too, and he might be a little goofy too. I mean, it's what you got to be. They're awesome. They're amazing.
They are, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well, this is an interesting conversation. I always think sometimes when we come up with like some ideas to chat about, and then we start exploring them, I'm always amazed at how
deep they are,
and how many little subtle things go into all these, and how interconnected a lot of them are.
Yeah, I agree. It's really interesting.
Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well.
Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and there's always further to go. And it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation and share this episode with them. We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring, seekers.